Pat is many people. Kindness.
A new gallery had opened on Bush and Polk Street.
This is dangerous territory.
Thank you for keeping me. A lot of these people were really sick.
Compassion. She's a good artist.
4, 5, 6 people sleeping all over the floors. Thank you for loving me. She hit me on the top of the head.
I'll do it my way, whether you like it or not.
I wanted to show human emotions.
But I want to be rewarded for it. Well, no.
Oh, let's run over a hippie.
Pat saw San Francisco in some of the heaviest times of drug use,
Got everywhere.
sexual freedom,
Stick it in and shoot it off.
of pain that people felt.
Fun. A good husband and got married.
And I think because of a lot of the pain Pat felt, she allowed that to show itself through her art.
What else could I say there? Well, she was her own individual bohemian. That's the way I looked at it. Yeah.
Now I know my ABC. Tell me what you think about me. Sing the alphabet.
So exciting, so many people in it that I love. Has anybody taken a picture of you with your cap on, captain's cap? Somebody's got to take a picture of you with that cap on, please.
I like that it says captain.
Yes. Put it on and take a picture of yourself here, right now. Then I'll be happy. I won't worry about it. I won't brood over it.
Safe in my heart.
Lifetime of achievement.
Yay!
Congratulations!
You deserve it.
The thing that's really impressive here is the way these two sisters have taken different paths. One of them working in a sort of classic Italian figurative direction, and the other one going abstract, almost like German expressionists. So it makes for a really pleasurable show. Tonight's a special treat, just to see everything up and displayed and lit the way it should be. It's great to see this huge turnout tonight too.
My father had come to New York because he was born of a family that suffered from the potato famine in Ireland.
The Conroys came to America in 1848. Daddy had a beautiful voice. He was able to sing Irish songs. And my father got on the stage in New York when he was about 19. He was a handsome young Irishman.
He used to come and babysit with me when my parents went out, and I adored him. I thought he was marvelous. He was a fabulous Irishman. He would have the biggest smile, and he'd give me a hug, and he would sing me his songs that he wrote and tell me the story of his musicals.
Oh, my father was an easygoing person, and my mother was the demanding person and the one that took care of us. My father, he was always kind, and we loved him very much, and he had great big powerful hands. I remember going to Central Park and walking amongst the grass. Oh, it was really wonderful. It was, like a wilderness. And holding his big hands. They were always so comforting. Big. That's what I remember of him. Big man. Well, my father was dying to get back into theater. That was the love of his life. And he had grown up with a man named Hal Roach. And he worked with Charlie Chaplin, and he got into the early films, Hal Roach. And he started Our Gang comedies. He made some of the earliest films that were ever made in Hollywood. And Daddy was always dying to come out to Hollywood and join him and get a job. And this time he had a wife and 2 children. But he tried. He got into a car with a bunch of fellas, and he left Mama with a certain amount of money. But the car broke down in Chicago. And finally he made enough money to get us through to Hollywood. He walked in and saw Hal Roach, and he said, "Well, here I am, Hal." I came, and Hal Roach looked up at him and he said, "Well, Marty, if you'd been here 3 years sooner, I would have had a job for you, but it's too late now. I don't have anything for you. Bye." So my father's heart was broken. That was the end of his career as a singer and an actor and a musician. So he just did the best he could to keep us alive.
I never met a father like that. You go in on your first date, and the father first sat down at the piano and started to sing me the opera that he was writing. And the second date, he began to read the bumps of my head, phrenologist, to tell me what my future was. And then, tried to sell, he succeeded in selling me an oil lease for $25 with not the promise, but definitely the impression that I would be a multimillionaire very soon.
I loved her mother, She looked like a Hungarian spy. She smoked cigarettes, had a short black haircut, cigarette holder about this long with a cigarette at the end, and sit there, God, like I say, Hungarian spy.
She was the one that disciplined, and she was a fiery Hungarian woman. Jaj, Istenem!
What does that mean?
For God's sake.
I see.
Jaj, Istenem, that was Hungarian.
And the mother was didn't like America, had a hard time assimilating into American culture, felt a little awkward with other American women, had a strong accent, and didn't know how to socialize very well. What a culture shock it must have been for her. Terrible culture shock. So I guess she smoked a lot, chewed coffee beans, muttered.
She used to say, "Patsy, you are a rebel. You will pay. I am not satisfied with you. No, you will never succeed." And I really believed her. It sinks into a child when you tell them something like that over and over and over and over again when they're little. So all my life, I look back and I see I've tried this and I've tried that. I did this, I did that. And I set myself up for failure
Sooner or later down the line, it fails because of this, because of that. And I did that. I didn't have to, because I really believe way down inside of me that I will always be a failure, because Mama said so.
She wanted to be an illustrator. She went to Chenard. She wasn't there when I was there, but she was around. But her classes, I don't know, she went to night school. Pruitt Carter, she took illustration.
She was in Pruitt Carter's illustration class. You know, it's like apples and oranges. But that's what you did then, because you had to make a living. To be an artist, you better figure out a way to make a living.
We had a lot of life models, and in the corner of the life drawing class was a skeleton, and the thing was all bones. And I sat and drew for hours, every bone in the body. And then I studied Michelangelo and Rembrandt and most of the old masters.
She entered this contest, sent in this contest by George Macy, who had a very exclusive book business, very high class, high priced, illustrated. So she sent in some samples, Revolt of the Angels, Anatole France, and she won the contest. And one of the prizes was awarding the contract, finish the book, and also a promise of 2 other books. So she started to do Revolt of the Angels book. Her Revolt of the Angels figures began to change. Her whole attitude now, she wasn't just going to illustrate, but also her drawings began to change. She began to draw more like Lebrun and Warshaw. I don't mean copy them, but I mean with that spirit. So she really developed, took a step ahead as an artist. George Macy got on an airplane and flew out and visited us, and what we had looked forward to was a great visit and a big check and the promise of future books. Suddenly collapsed completely, because again, she didn't focus on completing that work.
In the way he wanted.
In the way he wanted. Well, he was paying for it, and he expected it to be somewhat like the samples.
We all pay a price for what we do. And that's the art pain. And certainly if you're going to talk about your feelings and your emotions and drawing and put that kind of, and do it in a way that talks about the roughness of the world, hey, bingo. You're not exactly going to be on the cover of Better Homes and Garden or something. It isn't going to happen.
You know, sometimes my feeling is that Pat didn't stay with it. Discipline. She could have used discipline. To be an artist, you've got to have discipline and tenacity, unending.
Well, when I really am involved in a drawing, I'm really expressing what's inside of me, how I happen to feel. I'm happy faces, sad faces, awful faces, silly faces, grinning faces, depressed faces, evil faces, because I have all those moods running through me every day, you know, thousands of them.
For the practical world, the quote practical world, the world of commercial art, the world, you do this for me the way I want it because I'm paying you to do it. It's not her. And it wasn't Virginia either, her sister. Virginia went off on her things, were different, but Pat. But they both were unique. We're talking about unique people. We're talking about 2 sisters who are very unique and different unto each other. But we're talking about, in Pat, we're talking about a very unique person. She leaves us a pile of honest work. Didn't leave a pile of money. She didn't leave a pile of awards. She didn't leave a pile of gratitude from the public. That's different. She leaves us a pile of honest, good work that speaks to the soul.
I went to Hollywood High and graduated. While I was in Hollywood High, I met a very handsome good-looking young blonde fellow named Charles Carey. And one thing led to the other, and we fell in love. And we got married around 1940, I think it was.
It was just fun. Fun and adventure was what drew us together. I, in my old car, would drive Pat to Pat's house at midnight, and I would look in on her, and she would come out to the car, and we would sit and talk and fool around until her mother couldn't stand it anymore and would burst out.
My ex-husband, he liked the ladies, all kinds. And then around 1955, I got a divorce.
And I think all of us were in this thing together. It's like just, the witch being in the boiling kettle of pain. I mean, because we were all, we all cared about each other.
In my last life, I was a woman, and I lived in 17th century Germany, and that was the time of the Inquisition. And I was teaching people about the transcendence of the individual human soul. I don't know, I was doing or saying something that offended the ministers and the priests and the people who were in charge in those days. So I was whipped in front of the public, and I was put into a prison cell where my legs were very slowly broken in a big machine, a wooden machine. And every day a jailer would come in and tighten the screws on the machine until the bones finally broke. Then everybody was happy because I had paid for my sin of disagreeing with authority. And anyway, the jailer who came in every day and tightened the screws on the machine was my mother in this life.
Watch Channel 25 Viacom in San Francisco. Welcome to the Information Network Against War and Fascism, 747 Ella Street, number 4, San Francisco, California, 94109.
Pavlov's dog training was inflicted on the German people for over 100 years. They were conditioned to obey. And I remember hearing that even in the Nuremberg trial in 1947 after the war, to a man, the war criminals got up, and each and every one of them said, well, I was personally upset at what I had to do, but I had to obey, didn't I? Didn't I? I had to, of course, yes. And what it really was, what the psychologists have come to a conclusion, was that the German people longed as a people to step aside from individual responsibility for personal individual acts. A whole nation went that way. The majority of the German people wanted more than anything in the world not to be responsible for what each individual human being did. They wanted Hitler to tell them what they wanted to hear. They, in a sense, put him in there. If he hadn't done it, they would have found somebody else to tell them what they wanted to hear, which was they were not wrong. They were not responsible. It wasn't their fault. Nothing was their fault. It was the Jews' fault, and the gypsies, and the gays, and the Untermensch, the contemptible little pieces of garbage, the nobody people, and the Russians, of course, and all the other people that were not them, the Aryans, the superior people with the blonde hair and the blue eyes, and this insane quality of obedience instilled into them from the day they were born until they died.
No, there's no deception at all. It's head on, straight on, whatever you want to call it. It's there, in your face. The old adage of, I paint who I am and what I see, and this is what I see. I see pain. And when I look at her work, I see a lot of pain.
For many years, she had a lot of anger at the injustices of life and at a lot of hard times she had at a lot of how the world works. certainly a lot of anger and pain from her divorce. So I think that was something that was a theme for many years.
How many arguments do you think you've had over the
Oh,
years?
thousands. Well, you know, in our old age, we've cooled off because it's fruitless. But I'm always, I guess, I never argued with anybody else, but there was something about her that could really pull my chain, because I figured it was so wrong. And you want to do this? Well, if you do that, you'll never get there.
I think Pat also gets an incredible joy from shocking people and saying things that perhaps other people think about saying but would never utter out of their own mouth. And then she'll say it, and then she'll jab it in, and she'll twist it, and she'll just stand there and wait for the reaction in anticipation.
It was always so super poetic. At some point, and she said, that's all mathematics. No, but you know, art is mathematics. She hated science. That's her argument with Charlie. And Rand Corporation, all these big brains going to blow up the world. And, she never got off of that. You can be on it, but not while I'm eating.
I remember Pat proudly and defiantly telling people, my husband works for Rand Corporation, a military think tank. And she would act as if he was both an evil predator, as well as a very powerful and important person. It was a combination of the two. Because I remember Herman Kahn was there at that time. He was a family friend, and he put out a very important paper which shook the nation, which was of raw statistics of how many people would die from a nuclear bomb. And it offended people because of the kind of the blatant lack of emotionality with which he put forth that.
Always at Rand activities, a few. Always accusations about we just wanted to start another nuclear war just to see it. Wasn't clear. When I tried to explain to her the whole idea of all these studies was that we believed in the horrors of nuclear war and wanted to do something to prevent them, how to stop it. Otherwise, it might well occur. Oh no, anybody in a military uniform would somehow pull a trigger and she would explode into this person is a warmonger. He's terrible, His lips are dripping with blood, or he can't wait to shoot their big guns. He said, these big guns are like big penises. They can't shoot. And she says it with such gusto, loves it.
And she likes that shock value. She likes to say things that are brash and raw and horrible sounding because it gets a little rise, and she'd like that because that was real.
Stick it in, shoot it off, and sleep it off, and then go back and do it again. That's enough of that.
She would tell me about the sex life of all her friends, which didn't mean really anything to me. I felt I shouldn't know all of that information. It kind of bothered me. But then, of course, I was used frequently as just a sounding board for whatever she felt like saying about anything. I remember her saying one thing that was very positive, that gave me a good impression of sex. And that was that a penis reminded her of a flower, and with a stem, and it was like a rosebud at the end. And she said it in a very sweet, gentle way, and I got the impression that penises are very nice things.
My father was Native American, French, and English. Looked like the Marlboro Man, and they had an affair, so I looked very different than my sisters, my eldest sisters. So I grew up just with her. I didn't have a father because he was out of the picture. We moved to Monterey. And
after she divorced Charles, she moved to Monterey. Before that, she was in Los Angeles, where I was young, and I was sent to boarding school.
In Monterey, Carmel, Big Sur area, when she lived there, she moved there in 1959, and she was there through the whole era of the 60s. And so, of course, that was the whole counterculture, bohemian era that she lived through. I mean, people there now refer to her as a legend. She was a legend in her time there.
The Carmel Graphics, it was called. And she established that, and there were many students there.
The fact that she took the initiative that she did and followed through with it, and, you know, single-handedly organized and equipped the Carmel Graphics, the Graphics Center, and taught hundreds of people and gave artists in the area, you know, a home, basically, where people worked for years producing all sorts of wonderful works of art. I mean, that really was the jumping off point for a lot of artists who later became quite famous.
When I was a little girl watching her teach, I mean, she almost had a following.
Pat still was the driving force. She made it possible for it to happen by saying, I can do this, I can take it out of my money, I'll pay for it. Now, Pat didn't have a lot of money to pay for it, but she did it because she was able to put her money where her mouth was, what little money she had.
She got involved somehow with teaching the veterans from the Vietnam War, from actual World War II, but primarily the Vietnam War art. There was one guy who was an amputee, and she went to his house every week and taught him to draw, and he was so depressed and sad. But she lifted him. She got his creative juices going. The guy's wife was Japanese, and she had been a little girl when the Hiroshima big bomb blew, and she was burned, like 97% of her body. So here you see this couple, you know, in a very nice house with a swimming pool, devastated by war and depression. And my mom, you know, there, like an angel, helping them to come out and do something creative.
There was a lot of experimental writing going on, and theater, and artwork, and filmmaking.
She'd read and draw, and we would listen and draw.
But those were fun times. Really great. One thing that Pat was not, just boring. I always liked being around her. I liked being in her company. It was fun. Either for laughs or for darker times, too.
San Francisco, where she moved to San Francisco in 1971, and she originally moved into the Goodman Building, which in prior years had been an artist cooperative. But as time went by, it turned into kind of a housing for all sorts of city characters. Some were artists and some were not.
My name is Roy R. Ostrowski. Well, I lived in the Goodman Building, in the late 60s. And the owner of the building, Mr. Goodman, owned Goodman Lumber Company. And we figured that out because when he put fire escapes in, they were wooden.
When I was there, I mean, they were really wonderful. It was a wonderful group of people. We just really, everybody just connected really well.
Oh, Janis Joplin used to live there and things like that. All of a sudden, the building was condemned, or about to be condemned, by redevelopment took it over.
She managed to find out history of the building, went through all the political channels in San Francisco to get the building onto historic status.
And the Goodman Building was still there. It still is there. About 140 years later.
Well, she really got caught up for a number of years in activism in San Francisco.
Fighting for homeless people's rights, fighting against the war, fighting against mainly big business and the military.
Activism was appreciated, and she kind of grew into that. And I remember sometime around 1971 or 2, I was watching the ABC News out of San Francisco, and I'm watching a story, and there's a church being demolished, and all of a sudden there's a picture of a bulldozer, and there's a woman standing in front of the bulldozer, and it's my Aunt Pat, and she's trying to stop the bulldozer from destroying this historic wooden church.
She was fearless. One thing is that she, made soup for the Food Not Bombs group. Faithfully made, they made large pots of soup that they would take out into the streets and just feed people who were hungry.
Who were these people?
Well, some of them were into booze and drugs. Drugs were all over the place then, Everybody, anybody that could would go get some and take it and sniff it or smoke it or whatever. And my idea of a high is an apple, a grapefruit, an orange, or a banana.
She saved a lot of people's lives, a lot of those street people that no one would touch. I mean, people that are so mentally ill or so lost, even outside the system.
So these kids were like drunkards and dope addicts, She would pick up people off the street. One of them was a boy named Timothy Coughlin, who was a real space case. Real space case.
She treated them, a lot of these severely mentally ill people, as though they were normal people. She gave them birthday parties, little touches. She kind of played Big Mama and lectured them about their lives and asked them about their family. She expressed an interest in them, which no one had done.
And I read in the announcement in the newspaper a new gallery had opened. I became friends with Pat. So she had basically a salon going there. You would never know who you would meet in there. I met some of the curators of all the largest, most important art galleries in San Francisco, as well as quite a few artists, and then kids off the street. She kept pushing me to do a documentary on your photography, do a documentary on these street children. I just started it with Pat and the children she knew.
There were a lot of people from all over the country. There was a whole runaway kid, teenager, street culture.
A lot of the runaway children or children that had just been kicked out of their homes, they gravitated toward San Francisco and to Polk Street because they could sell their bodies there for sex on the street.
I don't know, every discontented or abused kid from some other part of the country ended up being on the streets in San Francisco.
Back then, there were a lot of young male prostitutes on Polk Street. That was big. A lot of people were getting into the whole gay scene, and I mean exposing it.
But the gay culture was very wild, and it was at its zenith. There was a whole, bathhouse kind of social culture, and before people were aware of AIDS and how it was transmitted. So there was a lot of partying in the streets.
It was more outrageous and wild and colorful and flamboyant and just flaming. Oh my God, the gays were so flaming. It was just wild. And my mother, of course, invited them all in.
We're all different. Each life is precious, priceless. It's a chance to develop ourselves. One more step, one more step. The whole world is a school, that and nothing more, and every human being on earth is in school. And I believe we really are. I think we're all in kindergarten.
And she lived in a little teeny apartment, lived on almost no money. She always shared whatever she had. Her last change in her pocket. Always help people. It's her a natural generosity of spirit. I mean, if more people were like that, we would have no homeless. And is it trouble? Yes, it's some trouble.
hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.